All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. My name is Peggy, and I am one of the trips and rentals managers at Outdoor Pursuits at the University of Milwaukee. So tonight, I'm just going to be teaching you guys a little bit more on topographic maps, mostly some basics and how to read them and how to use them in any outdoor trip that you will be planning. So we'll go ahead and get started here. All right, so what are topographic maps? They are detailed records of geographic positions and elevations of both natural and man-made features. Oh, sorry about that. And then they show the shape of the area and the kind of like the characteristics of the land that you're in as well by using what we call contour lines. So just diving right into this, I just want to go right ahead and start by looking at some of the symbols that you'll see on some topo maps. And there's lots of different colors that are used to show different symbols on maps. So first are going to be things that are depicted in black colors. So these are going to be things like boundaries. You'll see dashed lines depicting different boundaries. Buildings or like campsites or picnic sites, schools or houses or buildings. You'll see bridges, tunnels, crossings, and monuments, dams, roads, highways, railroads, and pipelines. So mostly man-made structures or boundaries are going to be depicted in the color black using different symbols, such as like a campsite for a campsite, dash lines for boundaries, and things like that. As for the color blue, obviously this is going to be showing water features on a map, like canals, streams, lakes, or ponds, things like that. Now this top picture here, sorry, there we go. This top picture here, it's kind of interesting. Living in Wisconsin, we don't really have many coastal features. However, we will be seeing like exposed wrecks and stuff on maps in the Great Lakes around us, or wrecks under the water. You'll also see different things depicting different types of like water features. So if you look at the picture on the lower, you'll see that there's that lake right in the middle of that picture, and then glaciers are depicted in like a little bit of like a broken up blue color. So anything blue, your best guess is going to be that that's a water feature. The next thing are things that are depicted in more like a brown color. This is going to be showing like ground covering, so like sand, mud, or gravel. So anything that's like a brown color like that, it's going to be depicting some sort of ground cover. Next are green symbols. So obviously green is going to show vegetation. The heavier the vegetation, the heavier the green, the thicker the vegetation. And there's also different ways that vegetation is shown. So you'll see that there's like dots that show like scrub areas and orchards and vineyards. So if it's green, that means that there's vegetation in that area. Whereas if it's not green, that area is probably like a bald spot, or it's probably showing rocks or place where there's less trees and less woods. Next are just these red symbols. These are just going to show like boundaries again, urban areas, and different ranges for, like national parks or areas around that place on a map. So the biggest thing that make topographic maps different than other regular maps are going to be those contour lines. And these are lines that show equal points of elevation, and they show the shape and elevation of the terrain. So that's what makes contour lines such a special aspect of topographic maps. And as you can see in these pictures here, they're obviously the lines that are kind of squiggly all around those pictures in the maps there. One thing that I want to point out are index lines. So index lines are going to be the thick, darker contour lines that depict the elevation of that spot. One thing to note is that index lines are not the distance between the lines, but just the distance, or like the difference in elevation. So as you can see, there's the 700, which is one index line. The next index line is going to be an 800. But then there's those thinner contour lines sandwiched in between those index lines. So again, index lines are going to be those thicker, darker lines, and they'll have the elevation depicted on them as well. So contour intervals are going to show the distance in elevation between those lines in feet or kilometers or whatever the map is using. So the contour interval is going to be between that index line and the next contour line and the contour line after that. It's the difference in, it's the distant, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, the difference in elevation between those lines. And this contour interval is always going to be the same for each contour line. So let's focus on how to find a contour interval. So as you can see, we do have these two index lines. We have 700 and then we have 800 as well. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 contour lines in between those index lines. So let's say that the elevation is 700 feet to 800 feet. And we want to find the contour interval that's in between each of these contour lines. So what we're going to do is, like just what we did before, is count the amount of contour lines in those index lines. And again, we counted 1, 2, 3, 4. And we know that from 700 to 800, that's a 100-foot difference. So we need to find that 700 to that first contour line. So 100 divided by 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm sorry, 5 is going to be 20 feet. So between the index line to that contour line is going to be 20 feet. So we have 700, 720, 740, 760, 780, and then 800. And that's how you find the contour interval. It's pretty easy to find that contour interval. However, it's most likely going to be depicted on the map as well. So the next thing I just want to go over are mountains and hills. So if you look on the left here, you'll see that there's a lot of closer lines and they're all getting closer and closer all the way to the top there. The closer those lines are, the steeper the slope. So we can tell that since those lines are very close together, the elevation is going to be changing pretty fast. So we can tell that that's going to be a very, very steep slope there. Same with when those lines are more spread. It's going to be a little bit more of a gentler slope because the elevation, there's a greater distance between those lines for the elevation to change. So the closer those lines are, the steeper the slope. The more spread out they are, the gentler the slope. So, like I said before, the circles that go consecutive around and around until there's just one circle, that's going to be depicting a peak. And we want to practice how to find the elevation of a peak. So the peak is going to be the highest point just below the value of the next contour line. So this might sound a little confusing, but it's pretty easy to find the rough estimate of the elevation of the peak of the mountain. So here's a really good example with Rock Mountain, and we're going to practice finding the elevation of the peak here. So the first thing that we want to figure out is the contour interval. So right here we can see that we have an index line of 1,000 feet, let's say feet, 1,000 feet to 1,500 feet. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 contour lines in between. So we can go ahead and say that the contour interval is going to be 100 feet. So we have 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500. But the peak of the mountain isn't at this 1,500. We have another contour line right after that 1,500. So we can say that that's going to be 1,600 feet, 1,600 feet. Now, if the peak of the mountain was over 1,700 feet, we would see another contour line depicting the peak of that mountain. Since the highest contour line is going to be 1,600 feet, we know that the elevation of Rock Mountain is not going to be any greater than 1,699 feet. So the elevation of this mountain is going to be between 1,601 feet and 1,699 feet. So the next thing I want to talk about are depressions. So a depression is just going to show an area of lower elevation on the map. And it can be a little tricky because sometimes you'll see those circles getting closer and closer together, but the elevation is actually going down instead of going up. So how do we know that that is going down instead of up? Well, we can tell by, well, first of all, the elevation is getting lower as the circles get smaller. But if you'll see, there's also these ticks that are on them that are pointing towards the circle. So those ticks are pointing down, show that that depression is going down. The elevation is going down in that area instead of going up. So normally when we see those circles, we think, oh, it's probably a peak. But since there's those ticks that are on them, we can tell that that's actually is actually lower, and it is a depression in that area. Next, I just want to talk about some water sources here. So in this picture, you'll see that there's a stream that's branching down into like a creek. There's lots of contour lines on this picture here as well. So a key thing for water sources is that the tip of the V points towards the source of the water. So if you look here on the stream that's like right in the middle of the picture, as the contour lines get closer to, get closer to that stream, it makes a little bit of a V. So the tip of that V is going to point towards the source of the water. So here's a really great example. So when we're looking at this map here, we can see that there is a creek. There's two creeks actually, and we want to find which way the water is flowing. So let's find out which way the water is flowing. So looking at this map, we can see that there's these index lines and contour lines that create this V that are pointing towards the creek. And the tip of that V is going up towards the screen, or towards the top of the map here. So we can tell that the creek is flowing down here and it is going into the lake that's depicted on the map here. So because those V's are going up towards the top, that's pointing towards the source of the water. So we can tell that that water is going to be flowing down towards the lake. And that is all that I have on topographic maps. Do you guys have any questions regarding the topo maps or anything like that? Feel free to put in the comments or the questions area. I'd love to chat with you guys about any questions that you have. All right. And here are some of my sources. These are just really awesome sources to have. They go a little bit more in depth on how to read topo maps and just really great sources to have just in case, you know, just a good refresher on how to use them. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys joining tonight. And as always, I'll be hanging around. So if you do have any questions, feel free to let me know.